In the last decade, national park visitation has increased 600%. You may have seen college girls getting their pictures taken posing at an overlook, increasing the visibility of formerly unknown places and driving up visitation. It's created a huge tourist surge to places like Zion National Park, and 50% of those visitors pass through this major transportation hub on their way to the park. Okay, it may not look like it now, but everything I told you was true about 100 years ago during the initial tourism boom to the national parks. This is LUND, Utah. Union Pacific ran a spur line off here to get to the Grand Circle tour of national parks. Tourists from the east and west coast transferred here to go to Cedar City, Utah on their way to Bryce Canyon, Cedar Breaks, Zion, Pipe Springs, Kaibab National Forest, and the Grand Canyon. This summer I decided to recreate the tour exactly as given in the 1926 Union Pacific Guide and compare with the tourism of today. After transferring off the main line at LUND, a spur railroad took tourists to Cedar City, Utah, where they would transfer to buses for the trip. I tried to follow the original path as accurately as possible, sticking to the still drivable roads, but I had to take a short detour to Zion's KOLOB canyons. The road was just resurfaced last year and they're still polishing things up this year. The north end of Zion wasn't a part of the park in 1926 and still sees minimal visitation compared to the main canyon to the south, but it's only a 30-minute detour off I-15 to some of the most dramatic canyons in existence. The narrow box canyons still require an entrance fee to visit and are designated wilderness areas, but there are multiple trails exploring the canyons and linking back to the main part of the park. The steep, 2,000-foot tall sheer cliffs give a fantasy world feel to the whole area. There was a ton of noise coming from the trees. This wet rain year seems to have been a boon for the cicadas, which were out in force. I also saw a lizard that's probably loving the cicada dinner as well, although judging from his tail it looks like he escaped being food himself at least once. You have to get in the mindset of the national parks tourism in the first decade of the National Park Service. The automotive tourism wave was still a few decades away. Rail was still the main method of crossing the country. Most visitors were upper middle class tourists from the larger cities like Chicago or New York, exploring the natural wonders that the national park system had shown us recently. We've seen all this quite a bit now, but at the time, these jewels of the country were really still being discovered for the first time in the eyes of most of America. People may have read some stories of mountain men braving the wilds, but they probably never pictured the beauty those wildlands held. This was the beginning of seeing these areas as a source of recreation and relaxation, and not as a dangerous, untamed wilderness. The campgrounds are nice and well developed now, but the original tour members got to stay in nice lodges and cabins, so I guess in a way I'm still roughing it. I would have loved to have been able to stay in the original lodges to perfectly match the 1926 tour, but I just can't afford it. Try to avoid the wildlife as much as possible, but this guy was blocking me into my campsite, so I just went wide as possible around him. He seemed used to it. People talk about the crowds and you see the lines going up to Angel's Landing. I'm all alone right now. Nobody in front of me, nobody behind me. No line. And I'm getting an amazing view. Just everybody goes to the popular spot. Yeah, it's going to be crowded, but there's so many good places to go. This is an easy hike. Anybody can do this. Dogs are allowed, bikes are allowed. It's really easy, it's really nice. You get the view, you don't get the crowds. And this is peak season and there's nobody around me. You just gotta know what you're doing. Peace and serenity can still be found, but it's not all quiet and serene anymore. Tourism has definitely discovered the national parks. And in recent years it seems things have gotten out of hand. This is exactly what I came to see and how it's changed compared to 1926. The Riverwalk Trail leads to the Narrows and is one of the busiest trails in the park. Today the Narrows were closed due to recent high water. A recent rockfall discouraged people from the area, and there were still this many people hiking on the trail. The benefits of the trail is that it's very easy, making it family friendly and senior friendly. It's even wheelchair accessible through much of its length. The squirrels here are completely acclimated to people and used to handouts encouraging people to break the rules and try to get a good Instagram photo with the squirrel. Believe it or not, bear and cougars aren't the #1 source of animal-related injuries in Zion, it's these little guys. Another big problem is rock stacking. The National Park Service considers it a form of vandalism. It seems a bit harsh at first, but it is taking the natural landscape and rearranging it, so it's no longer natural and it reflects the hand of man. While it's easier to fix than names carved into the stone, that doesn't make it better or allowed. A whole other video could be made on trail etiquette, but this is already going on too long. Luckily, for all that I saw, I didn't see anybody here feeding the animals or stacking the rocks themselves, just leftovers that people had done it before. Although the #1 trail in the park is busy, the rest of the park is much more quiet. There are a lot of places for solitude. This is one of the busiest trails in the park, but you don't see any lions here. Nobody stopped to enjoy this view, they just continued on to Angel's Landing. The Grotto picnic area was abandoned, just me and this wild turkey. 50 feet away, people were spilling off the bus for Angel's Landing and never noticing the wildlife. The Zion Lodge, probably the busiest non-trail section besides the visitor center, was busy but not crowded. Just a nice place to eat some ice cream and relax on the lawn. I also wandered over to one of the most beautiful places in the park. Only 200 feet away from the shuttle stop, and I didn't see another human being the whole time. So is this what it was like for tourists in 1926? Before internet, before TV, when motion pictures didn't have sound yet, the main source of learning about the rest of the country was books, magazine digests, and silent film news releases. And pictures of amazing places were flowing in from the recently protected wonders of America. Today we have social media articles and internet video streaming, but it's not really so different. We see amazing pictures of some place, we're shocked that it's in our own country, and plan a trip to check it out. The biggest change is more people with disposable incomes and the easier cross-country travel we have today. You may be saying that it's different now with the Instagram influencers getting more people into the parks, but remember at the beginning of the video when I mentioned the photos of college girls posing at the national parks driving up visitation? I was speaking of the 1920s, not modern day. When Zion opened, they had a group of college co-eds come to the park to be photographed enjoying the sights before officially opening the park to the world. And if you think that 20-something Instagram girls posing on a spectacular cliff rim or playing ukuleles around a campfire is a hipster fad of the 2000s, then you might be surprised. Influencers are not new to the national parks. The view down canyon in Zion is always great, but the canyon curves to reflect the light of the setting sun up the canyon. The popular photo location is the bridge as Utah State Highway 9 turns east towards the east entrance, but you'll have to line up shoulder to shoulder with other photographers just to get the same picture that everybody's already taken before, as amazing as it is. If you head down the Paras Trail, there are a few other pedestrian bridges with a similar view, but you get them all to yourself. An almost full moon stopped me from getting any good astrophotography shots this trip, but Zion isn't the best park for dark skies anyway. Nearby Springville and St. George pump out quite a bit of light pollution, so it can be tricky. For as beautiful as it is, Zion isn't that remote. but it still makes for an amazing evening on the first leg of the Union Pacific tour.